The night is quiet, and the centuries are quieter still. Imagine a narrow lane in a medieval town, curved like a cat's tail, and paved with worn cobbles that remember countless footsteps. Shutters are drawn, hearths banked, and the last glimmer of day has folded itself into the thatch. A bell somewhere far off marks the hour, and then, as if on cue, everything grows gently still. No more market calls, no more gossip, only the rustle of straw, the hush of wind slipping through a chink in the wood, and the distant yawn of a sleepy dog. It is in this kind of quiet that we approach a subject that seems so large in memory and so small in sound. Why a medieval woman might fear her wedding night. And though fear is a sharp word, tonight we will hold it softly like a folded cloth, turning it in lamplight to see how it's stitched. Customs and whispers, the weight of expectation, the tender ache of leaving one home for another. It is not a tale of alarm. It is a tale of feelings woven into daily life, where everything is simpler and yet heavier, like a wool cloak after rain. Picture a girl who has grown up in the company of women. Mother, grandmother, sisters, cousins, neighbors who arrive a dozen at a time with baskets and stories. She has learned the language of dough and linen, how to lift a pot and a mood with the same motion, how to gossip without naming names, how to read the sky the way a shepherd reads a psalm. Home is a world of familiar textures, the cool of the doorstep at dawn, the grain of the table where bread is cut, the predictable creak of the same stair. In this world, a wedding is both the brightest celebration and a quiet ending. And that duality, light at the front, shadow at the back, settles on the heart. The wedding night is not just about a bed. It is about crossing a threshold with all the small uncertainties threshold. Crossings carry. Will I be welcomed? Will I do things right? Will I know what to say when no one is there to prompt me? These questions are gentle, almost whispering, but they drift through the mind like thistledown, impossible to catch. Before the day, there is the talk. Not the talk of romantic poets. Those would come much later. But the practical murmur of grandmothers and aunts, the kind that is half instruction and half superstition. Wash your hair with rosemary so your mind stays clear. Tuck lavender at the edge of the bed to keep restless dreams at bay. Watch the way you step over the threshold, right foot first or left foot, depending on the region and the season and the way the wind blows through the church porch. Certain things are never named directly. They are circled, described by the outline they leave, like a bird shown by its shadow on a sunlit wall. The result is a haze of advice that is loving, but also confusing. The wedding night becomes a room seen through a veil. Shapes appear, but the edges blur. Uncertainty sits beside expectation, and together they weave a sensation that feels, from the inside, like a held breath. There is, too, the change of house. In many places, a new bride leaves the room she has known. The warmth of her mother's spinning, the salt of the local well, the cat that curls at her ankles. To enter a home where everything is a little new. New hearth, new dog, new rhythms to the day. The landmarks you use to navigate your life. The way the sun lands on the window at noon. The shortcut behind the mill. The particular steady drip of a leaky corner after rain are all suddenly different. A house is not just walls. It is a map in the mind. And on her wedding night, a medieval woman might feel like a traveler holding a rolled-up map. The lines unfamiliar, the compass needle still deciding. Where is the good mug, which stool wobbles, which floorboard sings when stepped upon? Where does this family keep the herbs, the broom, the stories? It is not fear of harm, necessarily, but the soft ache of displacement, the small sorrow of leaving your dialect of daily life, learning a new one while everyone assumes you already speak it. Customs circle the bed like quiet guardians. Maybe the marriage bed is blessed with a whisper of smoke from the hearth, so that shared warmth is invited to settle there. Perhaps the sheets are newly aired in the sun, or a sprig of sweet woodruff is tucked beneath the pillow. Sometimes there are tokens, ribbons tied to the bed frame, an old coin slipped under the mattress, a saint's relic in a tiny cloth bag hung nearby, not for drama but for comfort. These objects say, "You are not alone. Others have rested here. Others have crossed this threshold, and then risen to make bread and sweep the courtyard and laugh at a goose chasing a boy." But tokens can carry expectation, too. A ribbon is not just a ribbon. It is a reminder of all the weddings before, of the mothers and grandmothers whose faces look out from memory, asking quietly, "Will you carry this forward? Will you be?" And hear the words blur again, the kind of wife who makes the house feel sure and whole. There is also the whisper of reputation. In small communities, life is a shared loaf. Everyone takes a slice, and everyone notices which piece you choose. A wedding is a public event, and the night that follows, although private, carries echoes of the public day, who danced, who sang, who cried in the church porch because change makes even joy feel heavy sometimes. The morning after is a kind of unveiling of a new pattern in the social fabric. A medieval woman might lie awake and wonder if she will like the pattern, if the threads will pull tight and true, if there will be snags she doesn't yet know about. It isn't gossip she fears. It's the sense of stepping into a story others think they already know. Expectations can be a kindly pressure, like hands guiding bread into an oven, and they can also be a weight that makes sleep light and fitful. The church, too, is part of the hour. Vows have been spoken under a roof of carved beams, with painted saints watching, with the scent of beeswax and pine resin settling in the air. Priests offer blessings and counsel, sometimes practical, sometimes lofty, often a blend of both. The sacred and the ordinary meet at the door, where someone's child tugs at a sleeve, and someone else hurries to save a loaf from overbaking. The wedding night belongs to this meeting place. It is as domestic as folded linen, and as solemn as a whispered prayer. Fear, if it exists, tends to be timid and private and mixed with something else. Anticipation, curiosity, the desire to do well in a role that is both old and freshly one's own. Like all roles, it is learned in doing. Lifting the latch, settling into the bed, listening to the house breathe, noticing where the moonlight falls on the floor and how it moves, inch by gentle inch, toward the foot of the bed. And there is the practical element, always practical in medieval life, where every day is a conversation between necessity and custom. Beds are not the springy softness of modern times. They may be ropes pulled tight beneath a mattress of straw or wool, which creak if you breathe too loudly. Joining a household sometimes means sharing a room, even a bed, with more than one person. A little brother nodding off in a trundle, a grandmother whose cough rattles the rafters, a baby tucked in a cradle at arm's reach. Privacy, as we think of it now, is a luxury most cannot afford. The wedding night might not be private at all in certain settings. It might be veiled by candlelight and propriety, but punctuated by the ordinary chorus of a household that never really sleeps, the turn of a latch, the mutter of a cow shifting in the byre, the soft tread of someone fetching water. The newness of it all, the new weight of a ring, the new shape of the evening, the new timetable of donk, and make a mind fluttery and wakeful, even in happiness. Beside these practicalities are the small fears that belong to all beginnings. The first day of harvest, the first loaf from a new oven, the first time you carry a full bucket without spilling a drop. Each has its own tremor. A wedding night gathers many firsts together, wraps them in ceremony, then asks for sleep. And sleep can be shy when called so formally, so the older women teach the younger women how to coax it. Warm milk thickened with a crumb of bread, a bath if there is fuel to spare, a song that descends the scale like twilight. They suggest old remedies, not because they know exactly how or why, but because keeping the hands busy steadies the mind. Comb your hair slowly, they might say, and lay out tomorrow's kirtle with smooth hands, so you wake to neatness. Check the window latch twice, because certainty is a lullaby. For some brides, there is the memory of stories told around the hearth that make the unknown loom larger than it is. Every village has its tale of a wedding that went richly, another that went poorly, and a handful that were simply ordinary. But the human mind holds on to brightness and darkness more tightly than the soft middle. So the ordinary is underrepresented in memory, even though most nights are exactly that. Ordinary, shaped like a loaf rather than a crown, satisfying in quiet ways. In truth, many wedding nights likely felt like a long exhale after a long day. Day of standing and smiling and nodding and being draped in ribbons and prayers. Once the door closes and the fire sinks low, the body wants nothing so much as rest. But the mind likes to take a last stroll around the house, noticing the newness again and again. Fear is rarely the point, adjusting is. There are, of course, the puzzles of health that sit in the background of medieval life, the unpredictabilities of the body, the mysteries of remedies, the keen knowledge that life is both fragile and persistent. A wedding night, linked so often with hopes for children, carries more than individual expectation. It carries family hope, village arithmetic, the practical calculus of who will help at planting and who will bring water when the well is far. A woman might feel the fine threads of these hopes touch her shoulders and tug, very lightly. Not a command, not a burden, but a sense of standing in a long line and taking her place, palms open, heart steady. This, too, can make sleep half. Wakeful until the rhythm of married days turns hopes into habits. Bread baked each morning, chores divided in silent understanding, laughter at a dropped spoon, comfort found in the way two hands learn the same knot. In some households, small rituals greet the couple when they enter their new room. A loaf and a little salt on the table to invite flavor into the life ahead. A jug of ale and 2 cups for shared thirst. A jar of sweet herbs on the sill to keep the air friendly. The bed itself might be dressed with its best linen, perhaps stitched by the bride over month. Steiny, careful work, the kind that allows the mind to wander into all the futures it can imagine. And futuring can be a tender sort of aching. So many doors, only one to walk through. Yawn and let that thought pass. It is too large for this soft hour. Tonight, the only door is the simple wooden one that closes on a room with a low beam and a patient chair, and the modest promise that tomorrow begins here. The sounds of the house settle like feathers. Someone coughs, someone turns, a mouse makes the whispering sounds of its small business. The coals in the hearth give their occasional soft breath. Outside, the village lane has turned into a ribbon of quiet, and the moon makes a soft creak of light across the windowsill. Our medieval bride breathes out and in and out the way people have breathed for as long as there have been windows and moons. Fear, if that is still the word, has already begun to dilute into the general wash of newness, like a drop of ink forgotten in a basin until the water clears again. She thinks of her mother's hands plaiting her hair that morning, of her father's nod, of her sister's teasing grin, of the baker's wife, who pressed a small sugared almond into her palm with a wink. The village has fed her, and it will feed her again tomorrow, and the day after, in gossip, bread, and the occasional borrowed tool. So many things continue. The geese will still be loud. The miller will still argue with the water, as if it can hear him. The cat will still keep its own counsels. The world turns untroubled. Expectations are a little lighter in the dark. And so, if we ask softly why medieval women might have feared their wedding night, we can answer just as softly. Not because of a single, sharp thing, but because of many small things, each harmless alone, that braid together at the threshold. Leaving one known pattern for another, stepping into a space where words are different, rhythms new, linens strange under the hand, feeling the gaze of tradition, tender but attentive, hoping to do well, to be kind, to make the bread rise and the garden herbs flourish. And then, once the latch is lifted and the door set back in its frame, learning the room by touch and by the way the light falls, learning it until it is yours, until you stop noticing it altogether. You could call that fear. Or you could call it what first nights always are, A long inhale, followed by sleep, followed by morning. And morning always brings work, and work steadies the heart. Rest now with her. Listen to the small things, the tick of warm wood, the hush of ash, the broom leaning like a dozing soldier in the corner. Imagine the bed a little firmer than you'd like, but somehow exactly right in its honesty. Imagine the scent of lavender pressed between linen, the cool edge of night air on your cheek, the steady sound of someone breathing not far away. A promise that tomorrow is not yours alone to carry. Let old questions drift to the rafters like thin smoke, thinner, thinner, gone. Imagine the step you'll take in the morning, just one, and how even a single step can feel like a friend when taken on familiar ground. We've walked far enough for tonight. Your mind has done its rounds, your eyes have grown warm. You are ready to follow the moon a little way, then hand the journey over to dreams. The door is closed, the house is kind, the lane outside is empty as a held breath. And now, let go. The centuries are very quiet, the bed is steady. Sleep gathers like a shawl and settles on your shoulders the second night. Because there is always a second night, even in stories that linger on the firster. Arrives like a tide that knows exactly how high to climb and exactly when to rest. The house has learned your footsteps a little, and you have learned one or two of its small songs. The tiny click the latch makes when it is perfectly set, the way the coals sigh if you bank them just right, the hollow thrum of the water pail when it stands a touch too near the door. Outside the village is the same and not the same, familiar faces shaped a little differently by your new place among them. There is a nod from the woman who sells eggs, another from the old man who sharpens knives and stories with equal patience, and a quiet, shared understanding from the neighbor whose window looks into yours. We each carry our evenings like baskets. Sometimes they are full of talk, sometimes they are full of quiet. In this second, night hush, the worry that once fluttered like a moth against the glass becomes simply a soft, ordinary present. Something you notice and then forget, the way you forget your own breathing when your hands are busy. And your hands are busy because medieval days were made of tasks that were steadying by design. Sweeping rushes, washing a cup until it gleamed like a small moon, checking the twist of rope on the bed so it holds firm, mending a seam with thread that traveled the length of your patience and back. Again, you begin to see the wedding night not as a single cliff edge, but as the first step on a very level path, the kind that runs beside fields and hedges and knows all the same bird songs in every season. Stories told by older women return now in gentler colors. The aunt who once offered advice with a brisk cluck of the tongue seems in memory to be smiling more than scolding. The grandmother's quiet sayings unfurl their meanings like ferns waking to do. You remember how she told you that a home grows around your habits, the way a bird's nest grows around the way its beak knows to place each twig. Habits begin here, where to hang the shawl so it dries without losing its shape, how much water to keep warming for the latecomer, how to fold the linen so it looks like a calm mind laid flat. These are not rules set from above. They are small agreements you make with the house, and, if you are lucky, with the person who shares the room's air with you. The fear of not knowing how to be softens under the rhythm of doing things, the way raw wool softens under washing and carding and patience. The second night is also when you notice the furnishings of expectation and begin to rearrange them to fit your hands. There is a ribbon from the wedding, bright as a summer berry, that looked almost too loud on the bedpost last night. Tonight you move it to the peg by the door, where it is still cheerful but less insistent. A small token from your mother's house, a sprig of dried rosemary tucked in cloth, a coin that once clinked in your grandmother's apron, a scrap of lace your sister made while the two of you shared gossip like a loaf, finds its new place on the windowsill, where it watches the moon and you watch it. The house begins to carry both histories without fuss. You realize, with a soft relief that feels like slipping into warm water, that you do not have to become someone else all at once. Some things can remain exactly as they were. The way you hum when you cut bread, the way you prefer the broom leaning bristle up so it keeps its shape, the way you sit on the low stool to lace your shoes because the world looks kind from that angle. Customs that once felt like puzzles now feel like tools. The pinch of salt set on the table last night is not a spell to get correct. It is a simple promise to season your days together so they are not bland. The bread you share is a reminder that hunger, like worry, is easier when halved, and the blessings, no longer bright and loud as they were in the church, settle into the wood like oil, invisible but protective. You find your own little blessings to add. The way you always smooth the pillow with your palm before lying down, the way you touch the door frame with 2 fingers on your way out, not for luck exactly, but to say I'll be back. This is where my evening ends. Medieval life is full of these brief agreements with the world. Each one makes the unknown smaller, the familiar larger, until you can't quite remember what it was you fear, only that it had edges and now it doesn't. You notice, too, the fabric of talk in this new household. Every house has its dialect, a favorite joke that appears like a sparrow at the same hour each day, a comfortable silence that knows when to sit and when to stand, a way of telling news that shows where people place their concerns and where they store their joy. On the second night, you learn how to tuck your own threads into that fabric. Perhaps the man of the house is quiet until after supper, when he suddenly becomes a brook of words. Perhaps the old aunt in the corner speaks only in proverbs that land like soft stones at your feet, asking nothing but attention. Perhaps the neighbor who stops by returns the borrowed jar with a sprig of mint, as if to say that objects do not come back alone. They return with small kindnesses sown to them. Your own voice finds a place among these voices. You try a word or two, and they sit on the table without causing a ripple. This, too, is how fear dissolves, not by argument, but by belonging. When night comes again, it is less an event and more a room you know the shape of. You bank the fire and feel, in your fingertips, when the heat is just right to last until morning. You listen to the house breathe, the rafters settling, ash whispering, and your breath matches it, not by effort, but by instinct. The bed, with its ropes and its soft complaint at the first touch, is no longer a stage, just a place to lie down. The moon travels its path across the wall, drawing a slow silver rectangle that makes even the straw mattress look like a patch of lake. Your thoughts move like boats with no oars, drifting, turning gently, bumping once or twice against the same memory, and then floating free. What was once sharp, will I do this right? Will I be right here? Is round now, a stone worn smooth by a day's worth of small good moments. Outside, a cart creaks by late. A dog answers once and then forgets its duty, and the lane returns to its favorite pastime, silence. This second section of our tale is not meant to add drama where we promised none. It is meant to show how beginnings become middles, how the edges dull until they are safe to lean on. Medieval women, like all people, lived in the long company of tasks and seasons. Much of what looked like fear was simply the hush that precedes a new rhythm. Now, with 2 nights behind and many ahead, the rhythm hums. You are not a character on a stage. You are a person in a room, and the room is learning you back. When you place your hand on the table, the grain seems to say, I know that hand. When you lift the latch says, Ah, this again, good. When you lie down, the bed says nothing at all, the kindest response, and the quiet opens like a door. Let your breathing follow it through. There is nothing to solve. There is only rest, and the tiny morning chores waiting like friendly birds on a fence, patient, unafraid, exactly where you left them. Now let your eyes grow a little heavier. The candle has a small, steady flame. The room is neither too warm nor too cool. It is exactly the temperature of letting go. If your mind tries to pick up an old worry, give it a gentler task. Count the stitches on the hem you mended, Remember the pattern of the rushes on the floor. Imagine the way sunlight will fall across the table tomorrow, and how you'll place the cup right in that square of brightness so it warms before you drink. This is the second night's gift, to make tomorrow feel friendly without rushing to meet it. Allow your body to become slightly heavier where it rests. Let the sheets feel like something you've known all your life. Picture the village laying outside, empty as a held breath, and feel yourself set it down. Sleep is at the door. It does not need to knock. It knows the way in. The third evening settles over the village like a shawl that already knows the curve of your shoulders. What once felt strange now feels gently familiar, and what remains unfamiliar is no longer sharp. It's rounded, patient, willing to wait until you are ready to learn it. Day has been honest, chores in a neat line, each one stepping forward when its turn arrived. You rinsed the cup and let it dry upside down, taught the broom your path along the floor, listened for the small note the door makes when it's perfectly set in its frame. Somewhere between morning bread and afternoon light, the house began to answer you. You set a bowl on the table, and the table seemed to nod. You folded linen, and the linen seemed to remember your hands. This is what the older women meant when they said, "Give a home 3 days, and it will give you back your name." On the third night, the house speaks in the softest syllables: grain, ash, rope, wool, and you understand them without needing to say anything aloud. Tonight, we walk a little farther inside the topic we're holding so gently: why medieval women might have feared their wedding night. The closer we come, the softer we'll tread. Fear, if we continue to use the word at all, has thinned to a translucent veil, and through it we can see finer threads. There is the thread of modesty, taught carefully from childhood, stitched into gestures, eyes lowered not from shame but from courtesy, voices held like small birds, not squeezed, not let fly too fast. There is the thread of privacy's rarity. In a world of shared rooms and overlapping sleep, the idea of a night that is yours, and one else's at once, can feel like standing at the edge of a pool you have never swum, listening to the water's gentle lapping and wondering about its depth. And there is the thread of stories, half remembered, half invented, carried by cousins and neighbors, and sometimes embroidered more than linen itself. It's easy to fear an outline. It's much harder to fear a thing once you've touched it, named its warmth, and folded it into ordinary time. By the third night, so much has already folded. You notice the kindly bureaucracy of custom working in your favor. The little rites that surrounded the bed, the ribbon, the coin, the sprig no longer feel like tests. They feel like handrails on a dark stair. You can move without gripping them quite so tightly. You're finding your own ways, too. You cool the room just enough by opening the shutter to the width of 2 fingers. You cover the embers with ash in a pattern that keeps them breathing as you sleep. You place tomorrow's tasks in a neat row in your mind, not to fret over them, but to greet them later like friends you've already seen across the square. A medieval day respects arrangements. It meets you halfway when you meet it halfway. In that fairness is comfort, and in comfort, fear dries like rain on stone. Tonight, there is also company in memory. You think of your mother's kitchen, its modest clatter and sure heat. You think of your grandmother's sayings, which seemed like riddles and now open like doors. "Hang your worry on a peg and pick it up only if it's useful," she said, and on the third night you find the correct peg. You hang the worry there, not banishing it, not arguing with it, simply placing it where it can rest. The room feels larger for it. You can hear the small outside music again, a cart's slow iron, the river's steady hum, a far off laugh like a dropped bead rolling across a floor. You are not alone in the world. You are linked to a chain of evenings that have learned how to become mornings. That knowledge is a warm, even weight. There are household negotiations so gentle they barely deserve the name. Who banks the fire and who turns the key? Who sets the cup where the morning sun will bless it? who listens for the bucket's last dripping whisper and moves it into the corner, who folds the shawl and drapes it over the chair's back so its curve remembers a shoulder. None of this is drama. All of it is comfort. The wedding night, viewed from here, becomes simply the first time you noticed how comfort is made. By two people, or three, or a whole busy house, adding small kindnesses to the day until the night lies down without complaint. If the first night had questions, the third night has answers whispered so softly they feel like sleep itself. Yes, you will find your rhythm. Yes, you will be yourself here. Yes, you can be gentle and still be strong. And now we take a lantern to an often, unseen corner, the craft of rest. Medieval lives were full of making bread, cloth, rope, leather, stories, remedies, and sleep, too, was made. You make it tonight with the same patient hands. You smooth the pillow not just once, but twice, because repetition is a key that opens a door in the mind. You straighten the coverlet so its weight is even, not for tidiness alone, but because evenness teaches the heart to slow. You place a sprig of lavender where the night can find it and remember fields. You take 3 quiet breaths, listening to the building itself settle. Rafters murmuring, that familiar small click from the latch, and the hush becomes a room within a room, the exact size of peace. The marriage bed, once a stage bright with expectation, is now simply a well-made resting place. Ropes tuned, mattress responsive, linen cool, wool warm. It is honest, which is the best kind of comfort. Tonight you also think of the village as a net that does not entangle but supports. Each cottage is a knot, and the lanes are the lines between them. People carry their lamps and stories along these lines, and when one lamp flickers, others notice. When one story pauses, others wait. If you were anxious, you could bring that to the well in the morning and dip it like a buck, it out in out, until it felt manageable. But on this third night, the net simply hums somewhere beyond the walls, a reassurance rather than a requirement. You are allowed to rest. The world will manage for a few hours without your hands. So the third night drifts into shape, fire banked, shutter set, linen smooth, the silver rectangle of moon traveling its patient road. Thoughts grow drowsy and kind. The old fear has been dismantled into its parts: modesty, privacy, expectation, story. And each part has been placed where it belongs, some on a peg, some under a pillow, some carried into morning chores where they'll be too busy to trouble you. If your mind asks for something to hold, you give it texture: the grain of the table beneath your palm, the faint scratch of straw beneath the mattress, the soft rasp of wool. These are lullabies in another language. They sing, "You are here, you are safe, you are learning the shape of your days. Let the room darken one more shade. Let your breath match the breath of the house. Allow the night to do its old, ordinary work of knitting scattered hours into one smooth cloth. The lantern can go out now. Nothing important will be lost. The path from wake to sleep has no stones tonight. Step onto it. It knows the way. The fourth night does not arrive like a stranger. It arrives like an old acquaintance who remembers your name. By now, the house has shaped itself to your patterns, and you to its. The latch has become second nature. Your hand finds it without needing to think. The hearth greets your kindling with less reluctance, as if it, too, has learned your ways. Even the bed ropes hum a little softer when you pull them tight. They no longer groan in protest, but give a quiet, approving creak. This is what happens when repetition becomes friendship. The wedding night has already passed into memory, and memory has softened its corners. What once seemed like a tall threshold now feels like a single step. And in that softening lies the real answer to the question we have been holding so gently. The fear was not of danger, but of distance, distance between the known and the unknown. And with every small act, banking the fire, folding the shawl, smoothing the pillow, that distance has shortened until it is barely noticeable at all. The fourth night belongs not to fear, but to weaving. A household is a loom, and every day adds a new thread. Some are bright, like laughter over shared bread. Some are muted, like the quiet work of mending or sweeping. Some are strong, like the way two hands carry a heavy bucket together. Some are delicate, like the sigh of herbs hung to dry above the hearth. All of them belong. A medieval woman on her fourth night as a bride would begin to see the pattern forming, not finished, never finished, but showing itself in little glimpses. A rhythm of voices at supper, a familiar place for the broom, a corner of the table where her hands seem to rest most naturally. The loom hums, and the pattern appears, and the body feels steadier for it. It is difficult to fear what you have already begun to weave. Tonight, the village presence feels different, too. It no longer presses in with expectations. It surrounds with steadiness. You see neighbors carrying torches down lanes, not to peer at you, but simply because they always have. You hear the distant cart and the occasional bark, not as commentary, but as the ordinary heartbeat of a community that has carried on through countless weddings, countless beginnings, countless first nights turned into fourth nights and 40ths. To know that others have walked where you walk is not a burden. It is a comfort, and to know that they are not watching every step, but simply walking their own beside you is even gentler. The lane outside your door is not a stage. It is just a lane. Inside, the tokens of the wedding have settled into their places, as if they've always belonged. The ribbon no longer feels ceremonial. It is simply a bright mark of cheer on a dull day. The coin is no longer an omen. It is a familiar weight near the sill. The herb sachet no longer smells like advice. It smells like home. Even the bed itself has shifted from symbol to object, from a place of expectation to a place of rest. This transformation is what makes the fourth night so quietly profound. The things once heavy with meaning are now light with use. Use has always been the true alchemy of daily life. The women who prepared you with whispered advice, wash your hair with rosemary, step across the threshold just so, still linger in your thoughts, but their words have changed tone. You no longer hear them as commands or puzzles. You hear them as small blessings that carried you across the first nights until you no longer needed them. You understand now that advice is less about instruction and more about comfort. People say the words that steadied them, and those words in turn steady you, until your own hands are enough. By the fourth night, your hands are indeed enough. The evening's rhythm is quiet and plain. Embers banked, shutter pulled, shawl hung, pillow smoothed. The small crack in the timber wall lets in a thread of cool air, not unwelcome, but reminding you that seasons will turn, that nights will grow colder, that blankets will grow heavier, that nothing is static, and yet everything is survivable. You are part of a cycle that countless women have lived before you, and countless will live after, and cycles, by their very nature, are lulling. The turning of a wheel is not frightening, it is steady. Your mind, once sharp with questions, now rocks gently with that wheel, round and round, without need of decision. By now, you may be so drowsy that words blur into images. That is all right. Let them. Picture instead the faint glow of embers, the cool square of moonlight, the slight unevenness of the rushes under your feet, the texture of linen under your palm. Picture the faint sound of someone else breathing, not loudly, not intrusively, but simply there. Picture the village wrapped in its own sleep, lamps dwindling one by one, leaving only starlight and the occasional sigh of wind. Picture the bed not as a symbol, but as a surface, soft where it needs to be, firm where it should be, honest everywhere. If fear was ever present, it is now diluted into the quiet broth of routine. Routine is the medieval secret for everything. Fear, hunger, cold, loneliness, all of them soften under routine, under the hands that repeat the same tasks until the tasks themselves become prayers. To sweep the floor is to say, "This is mine, this is cared for." To bank the fire is to say, "There will be warmth tomorrow." To fold the shawl is to say, "I belong here." And to rest the head on the pillow is to say, "I am safe enough to sleep." The fourth night is not a story of drama. It is a story of rest earned by familiarity. And if you are listening now, growing sleepier, you can take that same rhythm with you. You do not have to fear the unknown, because tomorrow will carry your handprints, your footsteps, your breath. Every day adds to the loom, and the loom never forgets. You are already weaving yourself into the pattern, without effort, without needing to try. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let your body sink into the bed, or the chair, or the sofa, wherever you are. Imagine the shawl warming on the chair, waiting for you in the morning. Imagine the faint smell of wood smoke, the faint sound of someone sighing in their sleep, the faintest silver edge of the moon at the shutter. The fourth night has arrived, not as a stranger, not even as a guest, but as a part of the home itself. Let it tuck you in with its plainness. Let it carry you to sleep. By now, the house is not new, and neither are you. Patterns have been formed by your hands, and by the hands of those who share the place. The way the kettle sings its thin high note when the water reaches the boil. How the low stool sits exactly where your feet like it. How the broom prefers its corner. These small truths have a steadying effect. They are the quiet clauses of a life. This is where the bread is kept. This is where the shawl dries. This is where someone will lean when the sky turns heavy with pre-rain. And when nights come, they do so without the charge of expectation and without the sharpness of the unknown. They come like evenings always have, slow, honest, and kind. On this fifth night, you are permitted to remember the wedding as if it were a photograph, soft around the edges. You can think of the bright things without asking them to be the whole story. The ribbons, the song, the bread handed ceremoniously from one palm to another. You can also notice the humbler details that comfort you now. The way a lentil soup cools evenly in a bowl, the exact arc of the light where it falls across the table each morning, the way a child's laugh in the lane sounds like a bell with a good note. All of these are stitches. Together they form a garment worn so often it becomes invisible and yet keeps you warm. This is the final night's lesson. Once the fabric is firmly on your shoulders, you can move through the day without thinking of each seam. There is also a soft expansion of confidence that arrives like a small guest no one expects and everyone welcomes when it sits itself down. The knowledge that you have found ways to make a bed, to set a hearth, to speak and be heard, to let silence be. Confidence here is not loud. It does not trump gentleness. It is the simple one, too, of actions becoming second nature. You notice things now that you once overlooked. A slow, habitual glance in the direction of the window to see if the weather will hold. The ease with which you hand a tool to someone who needs it. The small satisfaction of a mended garment that will last another season. These are not grand milestones. They are quiet markers of life settling into its comfortable orbit. And what of the lingering thread we have been walking beside? The notion of fear on that first married night? Tonight, from this distance, it is easy to see that the fear was not a single roaring thing, but a constellation made of tiny lights. Modesty, privacy, reputation, health, the future's possibilities. Like stars, each can seem far and cold when you first notice it. But as you spend more evenings under the same sky, the constellations become maps you can read. You learn which star is near the mill, which guides you back to the doorway, which points to the well. Fear, too, becomes a map when learned by steps. It tells you where to place your foot, not where to flee. And in time, most nights do not require maps at all. They become the soft ground beneath your soles. Now, let us think of kindnesses once more. The village has its quiet economy of favors and small gifts. Sugar almonds tucked into a palm, a neighbor's helping hand to lift a heavy sack, the lending of a kettle when the one at home cracks. These are not debts so much as the way people say, "I will be here." They are a backdrop of trust that makes the household safe, not by decree, but by practice. Recall, for a moment, the face of someone who offered you help in the days since the wedding. A woman who stayed to mend a sleeve, a man who carried coals, a child who fetched a candle without being asked. These faces become the soft chorus of your days. Their presence is the reason you can close your door at night without a prickle of dread. Safety is stitching as well as seeing. It is made of hands and small, repeated courtesies. And then there is the inward life. Perhaps most of all, The fifth night is when you begin to recognize the quiet changes inside yourself. You find that you can hold more than you once thought, more patience, perhaps, for the slow ways of a coarser bread, more room in your heart for another's small failings, more curiosity for the odd corners of the house that reveal their own histories. You feel the slow bloom of new stories forming, the way your laughter fits with the household's cadence, the particularness of your morning steps, the quiet jokes that land between two people and never need to be told aloud again. These are private comforts, tender and slow, growing. They keep the edges of nights soft. As you lie down on this fifth night, the bed feels no longer like a first attempt, but like a familiar shape. The ropes are tuned to the right give, the blanket envelopes you in honest weight, the pillow receives your head without fuss. The window holds a small square of moon that will travel its slow road across the plaster, faithful as always. You close your eyes and notice simple things, the faint smell of drying herbs, the residual warmth of the hearth and the floor, the low breath of the person beside you if there is one. The world narrows to a comfortable circle. In that circle, there is nothing the night demands of you but rest. Let your thoughts lighten now. If a small worry comes, a list of things to be done, a call to remember a loose stitch, place it gently on an imaginary peg near the door. You have 3 days of practice and longer to return for it. It will not vanish if you leave it for a while. Instead, try to think of a single, simple image to hold. Perhaps a sprig of rosemary on the sill, or the bright ribbon now tied to the peg by the door, or a small square of morning light on the table where your cup will warm. Hold that image like a soft stone in the palm of your mind. It will anchor you, and if sleep comes quickly, accept it as a friend who has been invited home. If sleep comes slowly, do not chase it. Watch your breath as it moves in and out like a tide. Feel the rise and fall of your chest like the bellows of a small hearth, feeding a steady flame. Let your muscles relax in sequence, size, jaw, shoulders, fingers, belly, legs, until each part is softer than the part before. Imagine the house's sounds turning themselves into lullabies. The quiet settling of rafters, the distant murmur of the river, the 1 or 2 soft knocks in the lane that speak only of other houses breathing. We close this tale, gently now, with a reminder that beginnings are many and endings are kind. A wedding night in the world we have visited together is seldom a single, terrifying thing. It is a threshold that is crossed in degrees, a day of preparation, a night of questions, a few evenings of practice, and then a life of small work and small joys. The fear that might have sat at the edge of that threshold is not erased but softened until it is companionable. It becomes the memory of a candle rather than its blaze. And most nights, in most houses, the world is content to hold you while you sleep. So let your breath slow. Feel the weight of the blanket like a soft promise. If your eyes are still open, close them now as if you are closing a book whose pages smell sweet. Picture the lane outside emptied into a hush. Picture the cat curled in the corner, the shawl folded, the coals breathing low. You have walked with our bride through her first nights. You have learned how small acts build shelter. You have watched how the ordinary smooths fear into habit. Let that smoothing roll over you now. Good night. Rest as if the house knows you and will keep you. Sleep without effort. Drift with the moon's slow road, following it until you are nowhere at all but dream. Soft, restful, and safe.